Hello, good morning, everyone. Now you are watching the TFFB Taiwan Film Festival Berlin 2021 Movie Forum. I'm Chiu. Today, we are having廖克发and Klaus Bardenhagen to have a discussion about expat and human rights in Taiwan based on the movie Near Store from our festival this year. So first of all, I would like to let you guys to introduce yourself to our audience. So start with Liao.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lau. I'm the director of Nia's Door. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me here.
And Klaus?
Yeah, hi, everyone. I'm Klaus Bardenhagen. I moved to Taiwan back in 2009. I was a journalist back then, and I'm still a journalist working freelance and mostly reporting about what happens in Taiwan and what I find interesting for all kinds of German media.
Mm-hmm. So it's really nice to having you guys today. And now I back to the Nia store because I actually watched the movie about 6 years ago in Kaohsiung, I think. Yeah, and also this movie won the best short film in Busan International Film Festival and was also selected for Clermont-Ferrand International Short Film Festival, right? So about this movie, because it's basically just a normal day of a Filipino migrant worker, Nia, who works in Taiwan as a family maid, right? And in between, her employer and she had some conflicts based on some daily tiny little things. So for me, it's not just a story about Nia's life in Taiwan. I think it, which could also resonate for all migrant workers or even who are far away from home. For example, me or even you guys. So I'm very curious, Liao, in your film work, immigrant workers take a huge part of it. Is there any special reason that you want to tell a story about them?
The word immigrants is very tricky in my life. Like even since before I came to Taiwan, like immigrants was called pendatang in Bahasa Melayu, in the Malay language back in Malaysia. At the time when my grandfather arrived in Malaysia, he was also immigrant workers from China to Malaysia. So we start as immigrant workers from China to Malaysia. And it's still relevant and even until today, it's because as you see in Malaysia, even today, some very Malay extremists still calling Chinese and Indians, you are immigrants from the other countries. So you shouldn't enjoy the full benefit of the citizenship in Malaysia. And that is why it's very relevant to my life. My whole life experience growing up, hearing all those politicians still calling us immigrants. And because I grew up in South Malaysia, which is a very industrial area. So throughout my growing up experience, I see immigrants every day, immigrants workers every day. There are more combination, different workers coming from Myanmar, Indonesia, Thailand, in JB's, Johor Bahru, where I stay. In fact, I live around them and I play soccer with them. So it's very used to me to see immigrants around. And before I came to Taiwan, I worked in Singapore. Over there, they call me immigrants again. And after that, I start to work in cinema making in Taiwan, start from a very junior helpers. They also calling me Malaysian immigrant workers again. So this all kind of overlapping experience has been one of the reason I'm more sensitive to them and also to this issue as well.
Here's a question for you, Klaus, actually, because now you're an immigrant in Taiwan now, right?
I am an immigrant, yes.
Yeah, so
I've been living here for more than 10 years, so I guess that counts.
Then how do you find that?
Well, you know that saying, there's been a lot of articles written about this, and the government is using this for the tourism promotion. They are saying Taiwan is such a friendly country, and the greatest attraction of Taiwan are its friendly people. And I think, yeah, you can understand this if you come from a country country in Europe or in North America, because then when you arrive in Taiwan and okay, people also realize maybe you try to learn the language and to integrate as well as possible here, then you will really be received quite friendly and people will be helpful and respectful. And a lot of that has to do with the image that the country you come from has in Taiwan, because most countries in Europe and in North America, of course, the US, many Taiwanese see them as something to aspire to. You know, they are more wealthy, they are more developed, even though that's not necessarily true anymore. Taiwan is not really a developing country anymore. But I think that the image the people have of the place that you come from also determines to some extent the way that you are treated here. And that's why pretty early on, I became aware that I receive a very different kind of treatment here than migrant workers in Taiwan, for example.
I see. So after watching the movie Nia's Door, do you have any question for Liao? Because I think Nia's life and your life, it's, I would say, totally opposite or kind of different, let's say.
Well, I have been taking an interest in the situation of migrant workers in Taiwan for quite some time. I think the first longer blog entry I wrote was back in 2010 when I realized there's some kind of double standards at work here. And I got to know NGOs trying to help migrant workers in Taiwan. And so when I watched the movie Nia's Door, my impression was that the people who made this movie, the director, they somehow really must be very close to the topic, because as a viewer, they really made me feel very intensely, very directly the pressure that Nia is under in this movie and how she feels about the way she is being treated and this kind of helplessness, powerlessness. So I could really understand what I saw, her reactions, the way she behaved. So I think, Lau, when you planned this movie, when you wrote the script, when you shot it, how did you come so close to the experience of migrant workers here? I mean, did you get to know a lot of them? Did you have a lot of research? Did you have like advisors on set who told you what kind of situation is realistic? Because it just seemed extremely realistic to me.
Thanks. Actually, the girls, the actress who played the Nias in the films, is her name was Eloquence. She came to Taiwan for studies, but planning to work here as well. And through her, my research actually is mainly through her. And before I make Nia's Door, I make another films about migrant worker as well, which is the title When It Rains. And for that films, I have Filipinos actress and actors. And I've been working with Eloquence since then. So a lot of my research actually came from her. Through her, I get to know the real Filipinos workers, especially a lot of them in Taoyuan district. And that is how I start to have the ideas of the script, how, and to make up with tiny details of a daily life. And another thing is when I make a films, normally I'm quite improvised on the sets, which means I change the script along the shoot. So every time when I shoot the scenes, I will ask Nias, which means Eloquence, the actress, I will ask her, would a Filipinos worker do this? Would a Filipino worker feel in this way? And sometimes she will, if she object with what I have written in the script, then we will improvise and change the script on the set to make it everything to be more realistic and more close to what the Filipinos really feels in Taiwan. So like the beginning scenes and the ending scenes, the beginning scenes where she go to a trees and then have a bite of the tree, that is a kind of a belief in Filipinos. Like when you have a bad dreams, if you have a bad dreams, go and find a dying plant and then you bite the plant, so you transmit that bad luck to the plant. And that scene is not in the script at all. It's like when we shoot, I see dying trees and I'm just walking around with Eloquence, and then she's telling me on beside that trees, and straight away we decide to include that scenes. and it became the beginning of the films. So this is one of the examples. Like I used to do it this way. While I'm filming, I'm developing the script as well, changing the script as well.
So I also have a question for you, Liao, because in the movie Nia's door, the door not only symbolizes the authority system between Nia and her employer, the lady, but also divides realism and hyperrealism. So how did you develop the door as the most important symbol in the movie? Because I find the door like very important. Well, obviously, it's round title, but that's a really clever move. Yeah. So how did you get that?
Well, although door, you see, door is seems such a simple thing to us. But because I'm comparing the migrant worker situation, because I've seen different working situation in Singapore, Taiwan, and in Malaysia, so I'm comparing as well. Although door is such a simple thing, but the working situation of some made in Singapore or even Malaysia can be worse than in Taiwan. They don't even have a room of themselves. Sometimes the employers just put out the curtains, like put something to block, and then they just live in the living room or some corner of the kitchens. So the Nias in my film is already seen as a better situation. That's why I'm trying to use the door as a symbol. But as door as a symbol as well is you see a door need to be open in need two sides. I mean agreement from the both sides. The other one side she want to open, and the other side accepting the door to be open. So this is like a bargaining space. And also, like I mentioned just now, the situation of some maid in other countries is quite worse. Like having a space of your own, just a private space of your own, is already a very luxury things for some migrant workers. So this is why I want to use the door. And like I say as well, because it requires a mutual agreement from the both sides. We shouldn't be misunderstood like it's always be the employer being harsh to the employees, I mean the migrant workers. Sometimes I talk to some of the migrant workers in the household. Some of the workers instead, they don't want to be too close to the employer. They say, I don't want you to treat me too nice. I'm just here to work, earning the dollars and then go back to earning Taiwanese dollar and go back to Filipinos. And some of the employer trying to be friendly to the workers, but those workers, they try to keep apart. They say we should stay in distance because they feel more safe, more comfort in that way. So I'm trying to say there's a different situation. But in the situation in the Nia's door is the employers trying, as you see the door lock is a very tricky part. It's like the door lock, is it really working? Does the employer really lock the door, forbidden her to go out and in? This is what I'm trying to play with. Yeah.
Okay, this is really interesting because after watching the movie, I thought Nia's situation for me is already quite harsh. But obviously, there's some more migrant workers that are living under Nia's level, right, in Taiwan.
Yeah, not in Taiwan. What I'm observing, I mean, the curtain is more normal. You can see it in Malaysia or in Singapore because they have a more limited living space. So they have to bargain with the living space they can give to the maid. So a lot of them actually live in the living room with a curtain or something just to block. So her living space is just the bed space, and there's nothing else. And all her belonging is just put beside the bed. Yeah.
I see. So, because Klaus, as you say, in 2010, you wrote an article about migrant workers in Taiwan, their situation, right?
Yeah, that was the article I wrote after I made my initial observations, and I wrote it in English, and I called it Cheap Labor, No Rights, Taiwan's Second-Class Foreigners. And I just tried to make other Western foreigners, readers of my blog, aware that we are foreigners in Taiwan, but we are not representative for foreigners in Taiwan because we are just minority here. I mean, the vast majority of foreigners living in Taiwan are migrant workers. But when Taiwanese talk about foreigners, when they use the word Waiguoren, they most of the time they do not even mean to include migrant workers. You know, they have like a word of their own. They are Wailao. So you see, it's like a total two-class system here. And I just got a little, I was curious, and I also was a bit sad and angry about the way it is. And then my final sentence in the text, I think, was that the migrant workers in Taiwan, they are fellow foreigners of us. I mean, I feel I have more in common with migrant workers in Taiwan than with the average Taiwanese, because we have similar experiences of not belonging to this culture and trying to find our place here. So I said that migrant workers deserve our sympathy, and they deserve our solidarity, and they deserve our support. And I think also making movies like Nia's Door is, of course, also an important way of raising awareness and making the audiences empathize with the situation these people are in. Coming back to your film, I mean, if you have an unequal relationships, there are two parties to this relationship. And I also thought the way that you portrayed the Taiwanese employers of Nia in your film was very interesting, especially the mother, because you did not make her out to be an evil person. I think people realize that she's also under a lot of stress and pressure, and maybe she's just pushing some of that down towards Nia. But still, if you experience the movie through Nia, I mean, she somehow becomes the villain of the movie. And I'm wondering how can it be that so many people, not only in Taiwan, not everyone, but too many people in different countries, as soon as they have a domestic worker living in their home, they somehow seem to forget the fact that that's a fellow human being as well, that they treat her, because it's mostly women, of course, they treat her like some kind of a tool and someone who just is good enough to follow your orders. Why do you think that is? What's happening there?
Well, it's a very complicated relationship. I would say it's a very complicated situations, and also a lot of the employers. I think a lot of the employers, they don't really aware they have this power over workers, like because the law is not fair. The law itself is not fair. So already giving all those employers more power over the workers, because workers doesn't have a say. Like you say, some workers, they can't change their job freely because the law is not fair. So this putting employer in a better situation over the workers. And if you are not aware of this, sometimes you can make very harsh decision or harsh judgment. So those employers will say, I can be really nice to you. I can be really friendly to you if you behave. So always come with the conditions like, if you behave in what I want you to be, then I can be nice to you. So this kind of thought itself is already a very, it's very unfair. It's already very injustice. They didn't aware they have this unfair power over the people, over the workers. And this is common over the place. I mean, to many countries, yeah. So although the ladies in the film, she might thought herself is very nice to Nias, but she's not aware she using the powers, that this unfair power over Nias. Yeah.
And you mentioned that you do have similar situations in Singapore, in Malaysia. I mean, Malaysia, as far as I know, a lot of the migrant workers come from Indonesia and also Bangladesh.
Yes.
Are there similar discussions taking place in Malaysia? Are there also people making movies? Are there also NGOs trying to raise awareness?
Well, there are many. There are even more numbers of migrant workers in Malaysia, and but sadly, we don't see. There is NGOs, but it's not that many, and it's not that active because there's a lot of restriction and limitation from the government. And also because as we can see how the government handle the COVID-19 is very serious in Malaysia, and there is some spread out among the Rohingyas, especially the Rohingyas communities and Bangladesh communities. Then they are not they don't really treating them as human beings. They just lock them out as prisoners, and then some of them were straight away sent back. This actually raised a lot of questions from the NGO and from the medias as well. The Al Jazeera, the channel, news channel, the channel actually report this, I mean, on the news, like how government treat really badly with the Rohingya workers. But in the end, this news channel was getting warning from the governments. And the government go to the head office of this news channel and then take away all the hard disks and close down the head office. And you can see the government is really harsh on the different voice, disagreeing voice. So NGO is very limited by the government. Yeah, so it's even difficult in Malaysia. And among the common peoples, I mean Malaysian peoples, because we already have a very complicated mixture of different races, Malay, Indian, Chinese, and also people from Myanmar, Rohingya. At the peak of, I mean, even now at the peak of the COVID-19, we can see a lot of hatred speech against those labor workers, those migrant workers. They will say, why are you here? Why don't you go back your home country? And it's spreading, actually it's spreading in the Malaysian communities, which is very sad. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this problem is also happening over the world nowadays as well. So I'm curious because I think you made the Nia store, I think it was in 2015 or 14.
Some years ago.
Yeah. So from that time till now, have you received any feedback from, I mean, migrant workers or even their employers or Taiwanese like me? Yeah, do you have any story about that?
Well, I believe one of the most meaningful screening for me is I was once screened my Nia's door in the migrant worker shelters. It's a place where all the migrant workers, when they have a legal problem with the employer, they will be sent to a shelter place. When they're waiting for more later news. It's a place where all the migrant workers were staying. So I actually went to that place and screened the firms. And it was one of the most meaningful screening for me because the people invite me, he didn't watch the film first. So he didn't know the film is about this kind of a complicated relationship between employer and the household maid. And after watching the films, I mean, in the public space, in the hall, after screening the films, and you can see all of them is putting down their head, and some of them is start to like have tears. And then we have a Q&A sessions. And then I do remember the first person who raised her hand is a female Filipino. She raised her hand and then she say, director, you are wrong. You are wrong in these films. Then I'm kind, at the beginning, I'm kind of shocked. And then she say, you are wrong because what the situation I met is even worse than what you depict in the films. And then she start to complain about how the employer abused her. And she is non-stoppable. She keep carry on saying her own experience. And after she finished her talk, then another raised her hand, another raised her hand. So all of them telling me their experience. This is one of the screening that I always remember because through my films, I let them speak up.
Have you received any like feedback from Taiwanese? Like that's something they have never thought about, or yeah, like mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think because like I say, when I screen it in the migrant worker shelter, the workers themselves, they're telling me I depict the employer too nicely. because there are more harsh situation. They meet with more harsh situation. But when I screen it publicly in Taiwan, and as we know, people who came from film festival, they are in better conditions. I mean, like most of them, they are not migrant workers. Some will come up to me and say, you depict the employer too bad, too evil. The opposite of what I shared with you just now, what the migrant worker has said. So they think I depict the employer to them, they see the employer too evil. They say we sometimes treat the maid very nicely, not like the one that you depict in the films. So you can see there is a different opinions and different feedback from the both sides.
We have the end up here, and it was really nice to have you guys today. And Liao, I'm looking forward to bring more of your movies to Berlin in the future. And Klaus, thank you for having us. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I hope you guys enjoy the online film festival this year. Stay tuned and see you soon.